I'm Bruce McGee,
And I'm Steve Payne.
and we're
Hi,
here today
Steve.
with Kit Wohl. Do you say it Wohl? How do you pronounce your last name?
Wohl.
Okay.
Wohl.
And so, welcome to our podcast. And you are quite
Hello.
prolific in your writing. Why don't you tell our folks what you've written and where they can buy your books?
I think all of the books are available on Amazon, and I prefer to send people to our local bookstores who
Right.
appreciate the business. But they're available readily.
And right now it's all closed, but many of them you can make orders locally. There's still the local bookstores. And give us a few of the titles so they know what to look for.
Well, it's a series of books, or several. But the first book I did, which was a Katrina book, was the Arnaud's Restaurant Cookbook. That was the first one. And then following that, the publisher really liked what we had done. And we proposed a series, the classic series of cookbooks. So we did desserts, appetizers, seafood, gumbos and soups, brunch. I'm trying to remember all of them. Celebrations. So I think we've done 9 in that series, and Creole.
Wow, that's a lot of work, Kit.
Oh yeah, but it's fun. And then we did the P&J Oyster Cookbook, which is the country's largest oyster packer. I mean, oldest as well, not largest now, but oldest. And then in the middle of all of that, we did the James Beard 25th anniversary book, the best of the best, the 25 national chefs that have all been named and were out. I lost your picture.
Can you see me now?
No, now I can.
Oh, good. Yeah.
It was the top 25 chefs in the country, and we're very proud of that book.
Wow, that's cool. Now, the most recent book you've broken with the writing stuff, and you've written about the ironwork around New Orleans. Why don't you tell our folks the name of it? And I wanted to talk a little bit more about it, and then talk about your cooking books.
That's possibly a new series, another series. We still have some to add to the classic, New Orleans classic food series, but this one is, I'm looking at the title here, New Orleans Icons, and this is Iron Lace. And of course,
Cool.
We all know we've got tons of iconic things in the city.
Right.
In the area, really.
Do you have it handy? You could pick it up and show them what it looks like when you actually have videos. All right.
Can we see it there?
Yeah, that is a beautiful book.
Thank you.
It looks like it would be a good coffee table book.
They all are. We do our own photography and layout.
Wow, that is cool.
And here's the
So,
inside front page.
oh yeah. Pull it
I
back just
love the old ironwork.
yeah.
Those are the kinds of photos you could convert into prints, you know?
Well,
Right.
if I was in that business.
That's right. Now, are you from New Orleans?
Yes, I am.
What part of town did you grow up in?
Well, we don't even talk about that. I ran away from home when I was I skipped my senior year of high school and ran to the French Quarter.
All right. That's where you wanted to be, huh?
Yeah, that's it. And I worked a crew at Gallery Circle Theater, an old theater in the Round. But, shut up enough to graduate, but that was it.
Right.
But that was my first romance, my first affair with the French Quarter. And then went on to live there happily in the Spanish Stables, which is a historical building. I loved that place. And ultimately the Pontalba. So I had an apartment there. And then I married and moved.
Oh, that was a catastrophe. At least moving. I don't know about the marriage.
The marriage is 43 years old. So.
Oh, so that one worked out good. So did y'all stay in the French Quarter, or did y'all move out elsewhere?
We moved to his family home uptown.
Okay. Well, that's nice.
We just miss the French Quarter, both of us. We both lived in the Quarter for years before we even met and adore it, but this was appropriate to move.
Right. So let's talk about the ironwork a bit and go back in history. There was this guy Paget who worked for Bienville when he founded the city, and he actually laid out the grid and gave the streets the names of what was then New Orleans. We call that part of town the Vieux Carré, or the French Quarter now. And the kind of architecture that was typical originally was sort of like what you see at the
well, we were three flags. I think we started out with the French colony, and then it flipped over to the Spanish. But
right.
in the meantime, there was a huge fire, and a lot was
yes.
destroyed.
That's what I was getting to. Lafitte's bar down there, kind of far down Bourbon Street, is one of the few examples of the original Creole culture. And then the Spanish came along and said, okay, we got to do a better job of building. And so they made a building code for buildings that would last, and that kind of became the style of the French Quarter. Although I think the iron was added later. Why don't you tell our folks about
Yes.
what started and why?
Well, it started out, I think our first iron was actually, it's at that restaurant Tableau, where Le Petit Theatre used to be.
Right.
And that piece was done, I want to say, when the my dates are, I'm losing my dates. He was a blacksmith from the Caribbean, very famous, and did several pieces that still exist. They're in the book. And then, and I think he did a lot for the Cabildo and the Presbytery and the Cathedral. But because of my romance with the French Quarter, we started out with our blacksmiths who did wrought iron, and that means they created this curvaceous, fanciful ironwork by hand, by beating on a piece of metal over on an anvil and getting it red hot, and then they'd twist it and bend it, and that's all wrought. But then in the 1840s, the Baroness Pentalba put the Pentalba up and decided she was going to use cast iron, which was new to the Creoles. So the thrifty Creoles took that cast iron work and added it to their second floor balconies, some of them to the third floor, but they were the really wealthy people. But the thrifty Creoles moved their wrought iron, their hand-done iron, to the third story. So if you walk around the French Quarter, you can see wonderful cast iron, very fancy, like the Pentalbas, and then look up to the third floor, and they salvaged their wrought iron and put it on the third floor. And a lot of the iron that's original was reused after the fire. Right.
So there was already iron being, and I'm putting up an example. I don't know the building, but it's the second and third floor. And
yes.
So you're saying the iron on the third floor would have been different.
No, that's all cast iron.
Okay.
Go to the Antoine's page.
All right.
Do you know how they weatherize that stuff to withstand like, moisture, like precipitation, rain, and
it's
so forth?
Usually, well, the really good ironwork, the wrought ironwork, is generally just rubbed and oiled and weathered that way. But then it adds, a lot of people have painted it off and on over the years. So, there you go. Nope, that's not it. It's in the book. I beg your pardon.
We can let you show your screen.
I'll show you. I'm in the Garden District. Anyway, I fell in love with the ironwork. Oh, here's one of our original pieces on Governor Nichols. You can see that's wrought. It's very plain.
And that means it's handmade as opposed
Handmade.
to molded.
Correct. And we'll find our Happy Antoines. It's really fun. I had a ball doing this. Okay, this is hard to see, but you see the second floor of Antoine's?
Right.
That's cast. Go to the third floor, that's wrought.
And is wrought more expensive than cast?
Having dealt with, I'd say wrought is much more expensive.
That's what I was thinking. So you
Because
put
it's
your
hand-
good stuff on the top
Hand
floor.
done.
Right. So you put the good stuff on the top floor.
Well, they didn't. They thought that was not the good stuff.
Oh,
Cast
I
iron was much fancier and intricate.
Okay. So you could make all the twists and curlicues and
More so than wrought. And then
somebody.
Was there a foundry? There must have been a foundry down there, was there? Or
we had a
something?
number of foundries, a number of blacksmiths. And when cast iron really got hot, several of the northern cast iron people opened offices and forges here and developed it here. There's a wonderful old house that an iron one of these fabricators, here it is, he owned a foundry and cast his own work, and this was his house uptown.
Wow.
Which is just magnificent.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be able to photograph it when it was still weathered and no one had improved it.
Right.
And now it's been repainted and is all fluffed and buffed, but it's much nicer in its original state.
Yeah, there's something you appreciate about the weathered look. I know that somebody told us that in the Pontalba buildings, they have an A for Almonaster in a lot of those.
All of the balconies, I'll show you here.
Yeah, I think one of them a second ago had the A on the.
Oh, they all do. They all have her initials. She was a proud woman.
Oh my God, she was
been.
badass, man.
Hey,
we talked
I'd
to
like
Chris.
to. She's early and often. She was fabulous. There you go.
Yeah.
In the French Quarter.
There's the A.
There's your A and the P for
Okay.
Almonaster Pontalba.
Right.
And then it's all in everything there. If you look at this image, you can see the second floor and third floor.
Right.
She has it everywhere, even on the little heat exchanger. And all the little pieces.
And so
I didn't count it, but I'd say there's a couple hundred APs there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there are a lot of them. Those buildings are so long. For folks that don't know, the Pontalba buildings are the red apartment, some top and stores on the bottom, buildings that are on either side of Jackson Square. So it's right at the heart of the city.
The twin buildings.
Yeah, right. And you used to live in one of those?
I did, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was a dream come true. When I was 12 years old, came down to the French Quarter with my parents as a treat, and stood there at the Pontalba and looked up and said, I'm going to live here one day. And they both laughed at me.
And then you did.
And then we did. But the trick to enjoying the wrought iron and the cast iron in the French Quarter is to look up.
Right.
There's so much going on overhead that you would be stunned. And if you look at a lot of the pieces in the French Quarter, even the wrought iron, the older stuff, has the owner's initials. So they're very proud of their residences. So you'll see everywhere these grandiose initials. And then the Creoles,
So when did they start using the iron to, I guess, decorate and protect?
in the late 1700s.
So
early on.
And it just kept on being a thing.
It was a decorative element that was fairly simple to achieve because labor, of course, was inexpensive then. And here is an initial. This is that wonderful house on Esplanade.
Yeah.
And here's some of the work.
And that was that. Now I see that S design. If you move that, the right hand image, on your right. Was it an S? Was it somebody with a S?
Matilda Gray Stream.
Okay.
Matilda Gray Stream, who lives there now, and her aunt, who she inherited from, this is her mark on a gate.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So that was this piece, the cherubs. That's one of a kind. That was cast in Germany. But
so that would have been wrought. I mean,
this was cast.
Cast.
And then when you get into the initials and things, those are hand wrought.
Okay. Wow.
And this house has 3 stories, you see?
Yes, ma'am, I see. Victor David.
That gentleman had 3 daughters, and he allowed each daughter to choose the iron for their balcony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They had a lot more time and money.
I saw a plaque. There was a plaque on the front of that house. What's the claim to fame of that house or that owner?
I'll tell you in just a minute. I've got to get back to it. I'm too fast. You all are too good for this. Okay. It's right across from the theater there. I'm missing it. Give me a minute. It's a ladies' club now. It's the Victor David House, built in 1838, and it was restored in 1925 as a ladies' literary group, the Le Petit Salon.
Ah.
So, and it's just, a magnificent place. Here's more initials throughout the quarter.
Wow. And see, most of us walk right by that stuff and never even notice because you have, like you say, look up.
Now, I want to show you something that's so much fun. The Creoles were quite protective of their daughters.
Right.
And here is a guard to keep people from going from one building to another.
Oh, yeah, right.
For security.
They read Romeo and Juliet, and they didn't want that happening at their house.
And there you go. There's a Romeo
yeah.
stance. You're not going up or down on that.
Keep those boys out.
And then there's your nice thing to keep people from climbing over your fence. So we still have a lot of really beautiful hand-done art, and that is art.
Well, and when you think about that, I mean, when the person designed that, they knew, in general, it was going to last a long time, and it might even outlast that family. In other words, they were making something that was going to be very durable.
It's durable. It's permanent. They were making their mark without fail.
I've heard that it was saved rather accidentally, that that part of the French Quarter became kind of neglected over time, and then by the time people were thinking of redeveloping, there was an active preservation movement, and they were saying, "Do not touch that iron."
Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen soon enough. But
right,
we used to laugh and call him Mr. Ricka the Old Thief, but he was a demolition guy. He'd go in and buy the pieces and parts when a building was taken down. And he wound up with a lot of the ironwork, and then people bought from him.
So it got recycled.
Most of it gets recycled.
Right. Well, that's at least something. It winds up somewhere.
So we still have active iron workers here, metal workers,
Really?
blacksmiths. Oh, yes. Yes, Luis Calomares is quite well known. And Luis is the one that got me into welding.
Oh, wow.
But,
So have you
so
done
you
welding?
weld?
oh, yes, yes, yes.
Wow.
My dad was a welder, so that's what kept him out of combat in World War II, actually.
Well, it didn't keep me out of combat, but it was great sport.
So
no,
have
I
you
went
made your
pardon me?
own? Have you made your own ironwork?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
It's really an adventure.
I bet.
But I wound up. I have a piece hanging over my swimming pool that's 10 foot long, and
Wow.
it's one section of a 1,700-pound ceiling sculpture that we did of cast aluminum, of all things.
Yeah.
But we had to build the mold first, and then it was green sand casting, and then we welded all the sections together.
And aluminum doesn't like rust, right? You
Not
don't have
really,
to worry
no,
about it as
no,
much,
no.
right?
It's tricky to weld, however,
I bet.
unless you have the right gear and skill.
Wow, I'm totally impressed. I would talk to somebody. It would never occur to me to get out there and do it.
It was just interesting. I wanted a fireplace surround and went over to Luis's studio to discuss it with him and ask him to do it. And so he believes art has no deadline. So
Right.
I would show up every 2 or 3 days to check progress. And one day I said, gosh, I wish I could do that. And he handed me a torch.
Oh my goodness.
And that
So
was
that's
the
how
end
it
of
started.
it. That's how it happened.
That's cool.
Go
I'm going to
ahead.
show how do you do that? Share screen. I'm going to show a building. I took a picture of it. It's over Muriel's.
Yeah. Yes.
And
now that's cast iron.
okay. And again, I'm walking around the French Quarter, and I say that's pretty. So I'm going to.
That's a pretty common pattern. It's a shell pattern.
Okay.
From what I'm seeing there.
Right. So they would have used that mold to cast a certain length and then take it out and reuse the mold over and over.
Yes, and then if somebody got taken away by another metal working group, they would take a piece of the fencing there or the balcony and actually duplicate it.
Uh-oh,
so
yeah,
you can tell, if you want to get picky about it, you can put 3 or 4 pieces of the same thing together or look at them together, and you can see how it loses its crisp attributes as it's been duplicated.
Right. Oh, and there's your.
It's like making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Exactly.
And there's your Romeo.
Guard.
And there's your Romeo fence. Yeah, keep the boys out.
Actually, it works really well to keep the people in the next apartment out too.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that was a lot. I think if a guy, if I were a teenager really dedicated to getting past that, I might be able to do it, but it'll keep most of your traffic down.
Where did they?
You could lose important parts.
Right.
Where did they get the iron or the materials to forge the iron when they would bring that stuff in so that they could,
A lot of it came down the river.
Okay.
And as ore, and then it was melted up north and came here.
Okay.
And they worked on it.
Here's the red truck. I'm not sure exactly where in the order that is. Oh, it's got the angels. I remember that. It's on Royal, right?
Yes. And that's cast iron.
It's really quite beautiful. And you can see how intricate it is.
But it's duplicated. And that's another pattern. That is the oak leaf pattern.
And they've got
and then up there is another pattern.
Oh, wow.
So your balustrades and your supports can be different. The original, well, even today, there's a number of different patterns that are considered, classic, and you order it by the pattern, and then the metal workers figure out how to make it fit and what pieces you need for your particular application.
So yeah, this is a highly skilled trade. I would think, is this stuff like very expensive to buy today, or
no, not terribly.
Not too
not
bad
at all. You can get a lot of these pieces that are patterns that were originally in iron. I mean, yeah, iron. You could get, they cast them now in aluminum and whatever. But all of this is readily available today.
And once again, you're doing your walking around tourist or local, but people tend to focus on what's the buildings. I mean the stores, but right above them, those are living quarters, aren't people still live in those?
Oh yes, happily.
I see an interesting design on the top floor there. The one on the left, it looks almost like the wheel of the steering wheel of an old steamboat or something.
Yeah,
yes.
I was thinking that too. A steamboat.
Yes, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Here's a really ornate cast iron.
And a star in the middle of those things.
French Quarter. I mean, uptown. It's
okay, I've got you back on now. Right. Look at that.
There's.
Did you take these pictures yourself, or do you have a photographer?
Yes. No. I did it all myself, and
wow.
with my helpers.
What kind of camera do you have?
I shoot a Nikon D800.
It sounds like a good camera. I don't know for cameras.
Yeah, and here's another image of an uptown house. Quite magnificent ironwork.
Right. Yeah.
Really intricate. But a lot of times you'll see a house where the ironwork is cast, and then you get to the gates and it's wrought.
Is one stronger than the other, or are they both about the same? The cast versus the wrought?
I've never fooled with it that way, so I couldn't tell you.
One of them is the
piece.
material that they use in those old skillets. Those old I
Cast
want to say it's
iron.
the wrought iron. Oh, is it cast?
Cast iron, yeah.
Cast iron. There's a wonderful piece, the Blacksmiths.
1864. That's cool.
Oh yeah, and that it's still, the people were gracious enough to leave it there. These if you look at the cemeteries, these are all wrought and done.
Oh wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the cemeteries, but they have a lot of that too, don't they?
Huge amount. Beautiful.
Around the whole. Both
They
around the whole.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
No, they say that fences make good neighbors, but I don't understand how that applies to a graveyard, a cemetery. Here's more cemetery work. There, some of the entrances. So I mean, it's an addictive habit to drive around and look, or when you're going somewhere, look at all the ironwork.
One house, I think it's on Bourbon, but it's somewhere that has like corn, worked into it.
Yes.
Into its iron.
That's I have a wonderful picture of it here. Here it is. This is
yeah, man, look at that. That is amazing. And where is that in the French Quarter?
There's sections of this in the French Quarter. This was uptown.
Okay.
And it's on Britannia at First, I think, either First or Third. But what's so cool about it, if you look at this piece, you can see all the different things in there: morning glories, pumpkins, corn.
Oh, wow.
And the story about this is the gentleman that owned the house married a woman from the Midwest, and she was very lonely for her home.
Okay.
So he designed and had that cast so she would remember her roots.
Right.
It was very romantic.
Yeah, that's very cool. And is this kind of ironwork common in other old U.S. cities, or is New Orleans kind of unique?
No, Savannah, places, you know, in the
Charleston,
South,
maybe.
yes.
Charleston or Annapolis, Maryland, maybe, or
A
Baltimore.
lot of gorgeous ironwork is in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
And my husband and I were privileged to be in Colorado and contacted at the time the foremost blacksmith in the country. And at the time he was in his late 80s.
Oh,
And
wow.
still had a forge. He was teaching, but he had a forge, and nothing in his shop was mechanical. It
Oh,
was
my goodness.
all by hand. And he spent the day with us and taught me some things and awed me beyond belief. Just a lovely, dedicated gentleman.
Man,
He had
and
6
people like
forges.
that, you watch them work and they make it look so easy. You know, there's no wasted effort, and they're just smooth and never make a mistake. Or if they do, you
Well, the
don't
first
notice.
time you do something, it's hard.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
difficult. And then when you've done it 2,000 times, it's a lot easier,
Right.
as he pointed out. No, I mean, the work, the ironwork, especially, you know, the decorative ironwork, is a tradition. And it's one I learned when I was starting out, that you learn up and they teach down. So as the newbie in a blacksmith shop or a forge, you learn from the next person, the
Right.
next youngest person.
Okay,
Then
so there's a hierarchy, right?
it's a hierarchy, a skill hierarchy, a skill
Yeah.
hierarchy. So when you had absorbed everything that person had to teach you, you went another step higher and another step higher and another step higher. Then when new people came in, you in turn taught them.
Right. And
And it's a tradition that continues. These are the most generous people
so
in the world.
it's an old-fashioned apprentice type setting where you apprentice, and then as you get better, you move up.
Absolutely.
I got a picture.
Apprentice to the apprentice to the apprentice, in a way. Yeah.
Exactly.
That would
It's a
be
stair
sweeping.
step.
So here's
So it's-
Antoine's restaurant, a picture I took, and it's not very sharp because it's at night, but you can see the grill work above it.
Yeah, oops.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that was me and my fault. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. But, I mean, you can see what the ironwork adds to the overall look of the building.
Oh, yes. Well, it's all over the front. Whoops, I lost you. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
here you are.
Okay, I came back.
Yeah. Show and tell.
I tell you what. Well, we'll get a fixed station pretty soon. Anyway, yes, it's an intricate, lovely art. And the people that do this are the major blacksmiths are pretty solitary. You know, they're working by themselves for the most part.
Right.
So
Unless
at
they
night, they get online and share technique and resources and images. It's hysterical.
So there's a whole subculture with this, of the black
Totally.
subculture. Yeah, that's wild. And you never
When-
think about it, but once you say it, well, it seems like, yeah, I can see why they would do that.
Well, it can put you as an advocate, as I was. It can put you in a very expensive hobby. If I'm a commercial creature, so I turned it into business. But
Right.
there's some equipment and tools I would have loved to have had.
Do you have your own blacksmith shop?
Yes, yes.
So my great-grandfather was primarily a farmer, but this was the old days, kind of frontier Mississippi, not a lot of stuff close by. And So he did his own blacksmithing and
Of course.
his neighbors, and he would build a raft out of pine trees on Leaf River every spring when it was coming up, and ride down to the coast and sell the wood, and then he would go shopping for the year.
Yes.
Imagine one trip. And the first thing he bought were two iron, just sheets of iron to put in the bottom of the buggy. And then when he needed a nail or a hinge or a horseshoe, he went out and made it.
Of course.
Which just amazes me, and my uncle would say to his dying day, you could tell how good a town was by how good their blacksmith was.
Well, most of the plantations, all of the plantations had their own smiths.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's some just exquisite work that came from the plantations. Unfortunately, they were done by slaves a good bit of the time.
Well, in the Spanish
But it was
time,
a way of life.
in the Spanish time, it's my understanding that they allowed slaves to save money and purchase their own freedom. And this would be something like, you got the day off on Sunday, I'm going to go into the shop and make something and sell it.
Sure.
And then save up money and buy my freedom. So it was a way up for the artisan. And then they became kind of the backbone of the local tradesman,
Exactly.
From a
Mhm.
neighborhood was founded for them. And they had not just this, but plaster, carpenters, whatever you needed, they could do.
Yep. That's where you see a lot of our heritage, and still do. The Creoles have a huge tradition of passing on this beautiful work.
Right.
The plaster work and iron work.
That apprenticing has gone on. So here's the Supreme Court, the Louisiana Supreme Court, its own royal.
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty good.
That's nice. Yeah, that's a nice, but see, today you can buy those elements and just weld them together.
Right. So they're kind of prefab, but then they have to set them at the house.
Yes.
So
So when they prefab them, you have to have the right pieces in the right size.
right.
So there's a lot of sawing going on. A little bending here and there.
Yeah.
Metal's a trick of Mother Nature, and it will do what Mother Nature wants.
Right.
You're not going to mess with Mother Nature. When you heat metal to a certain degree, it bends, either by
Right.
itself or with your help. But when it's hot, it's like bending a rope. Dangerous, but it's hot. And in fact, gravity is going to take over. So you're kind of working with heat and gravity at the same
Heat
time.
and gravity and pressure, like you can hammer that stuff.
Well, that has to be hot to hammer it.
Right.
You don't want to be
right.
hammering it when it's
It'll
cold.
break it if it's not.
It can
Here's one of the Pentaba buildings.
break you.
Yeah, right. So here's the Pentaba building by St. Louis Cathedral.
Right.
We've looked at it before, but this is a more far back. So yeah, they put the iron on that second and third floor, and unless you've got
But look
foot
at
up
the
there.
attic. Go up higher. See the attic? That's ventilation for the attics.
Okay.
That's AP.
Wow. Oh,
And
okay.
then,
Let's see if we can zoom in anymore. I think my
now
camera.
that you can still buy that pattern, by the way,
Wow.
without the AP.
So you can have your own Pentaba stuff going.
It's called the Pentaba pattern.
Wow. I'm impressed.
That's like, this is sitting here, or it's reminding me as we sit here of quilting patterns, and different people will devise these various, some of them very intricate patterns, for those textiles or whatever, for those, those objects. And some of it's very beautiful.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, I'll show you some current work. I love gates. I really got enthralled with gates.
Yeah.
If you ever go up to Hummus House Plantation up the River Road, it's fascinating. This piece, the cattails, That
Oh,
was done
wow.
in South Carolina, I think Savannah, by a very famous blacksmith of the time. And
Yeah,
the owner of the plantation is quite the preservationist. This is all salvaged from a house that was torn down,
wow.
his gates. And it's the same fencing that's used at the old mint.
Okay.
And
Yeah. And
then
the
you
cattail
see,
was literally, it looked like cattails, you'd
it
see.
was. It's
Yeah.
very artful. That was all hand done, by the way. Now, this
Wow.
is some modern day work. This was the late George Dureau. These are gates he did for the Museum of Art.
That's almost a sculpture in
It
itself,
is.
right?
It is. See, it's a beautiful piece. Then my most favorite, Enrique Alferez, did these gates for City Park.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think he was referencing grass.
It does look like grass. Is that at the sculpture garden or is that somewhere else in the park?
No, it's at the back of the French Quarter.
Oh,
He,
okay.
it's the grass gates, 1982, at City Park's original entrance.
Okay.
And a lot of his sculpture, he did a lot of cast work. His sculpture is all over City Park. And
Wow.
all over the gardens.
Yeah.
It's all sculpture gardens.
Yeah,
I mean,
City Park is quite beautiful. I took my son there the last time I was in town before coronavirus hit.
Gosh, well, this too will pass.
Yeah, New Orleans
We
has
know that.
survived other stuff, and this time, you know, it's the people, but it's not the architecture as well.
I'm curious when people were designing these various, you know, ironworks in front of their homes, and particularly for these balconies, do we have any records of anybody who was writing about this as it was being designed, like a diary or a journal or anything like that? Does anything like that exist?
I found 2 or 3 pamphlets, and there was a book published by the same publisher that I worked with on this, and it was the African blacksmiths, and it followed all of their work. None of it's particularly detailed or exotic. The
Right.
work, it's pretty cursory, and it doesn't get into the how and why of it. It got in more to the individual artist. But here's a piece at the Historic New Orleans collection that was quite popular, and that's called the Cathedral Pattern. It's a Greek key pattern. And here's another Greek key pattern on a gate. Different Greek key pattern, but see, and that includes a different kind of ironwork in the center of the piece.
Right. Do you ever do, when we have tours, do you do tours? Like,
do I know, but there's a number of people who do.
Right. I would think, you know, a tour just of that would be something some people would be interested in, especially if you've done after you've done your ghost tour and your vampire tour. Okay, I want to get a little more.
I'll do ironwork.
Yeah, ironwork.
Here's a famous pattern that's at Gallier House in the first floor. It's the rose pattern.
Rose. Wow.
And it's also used. Well, you'll see a lot of it. It's quite popular. What is her name? The writer, Anne Rice.
Oh, Anne Rice. Yes.
On Third, I think, uses that pattern or used that pattern, and
a lot of what I find charming about Anne Rice is the way she does work in so much of the local culture into her books. You know.
Oh yes.
Gives it a depth. Here's one of Bourbon Street that I took. If I can figure out how to do this.
You're quite the photographer.
Well, I take a lot. I take a lot of pictures, and every now and then one of them comes out. But this is late afternoon, and you can see how it's lined on either side.
Oh, yes.
With the just all kinds of ironwork.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. What's fun also, you'll see a lot of patterns you'll find. This one, this pattern here at Antoine's. Whoops. Can you see?
Hold on, let me stop sharing and get back on you.
No,
There you are.
okay.
You're back.
This is a pattern at Antoine's.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the shell?
It's a shell. It's a coquille.
Yeah.
The shell.
Yeah, I go to Bourbon Street to look at the ironwork, in case anybody was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great afternoon, and you can stop in occasionally and have a little cocktail.
That's right.
But if you look at the different things that are, this is all hand wrought. That's
yeah.
on Royal Street. But then look at the support.
Right.
That's also hand wrought.
Yeah.
And here's the pillars, the columns.
Right. And so this would be practical as well as beautiful. Like it was
totally
decorative,
practical.
Yeah.
I'll show you this. This is all hand done, and I love it. But if you look here, this is at the Preservation Hall. So here you look at the hinges on their door.
Yes.
Those are original.
I know exactly where that is. I've passed there a number of times.
Yeah, you can see the handwork. And then here's the balcony support again. That's a little dark.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll see that all over. And this is over the door.
Mm-hmm.
This is the window screen.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
It's
that's
just
nice.
I mean, I love looking at the old hinges and the things that were handmade.
Right.
It's just remarkable. And then if you look at Brennan's, this is a combination of cast and wrought. But at Brennan's, here's the symbol for the bank that was there originally. But if you notice it, it's a cornucopia.
Yes, which is good for a restaurant.
Yep. And then the same thing holds true of Arnaud's. They have some work over their Richelieu bar. That's the grape leaves, the grapes and grape leaves. And here's the thing from the haunted house, same pattern.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Well, you see a lot of that in the French Quarter.
Right.
And then if you are a musician, uptown and in the French Quarter, you can find pieces that reference their music.
Oh, I bet.
And again, here's your acorns and oak leaves. That's a variation on the first pattern I showed you.
Okay. Well, you can really see it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but, you know, we had to actually build a telescoping tripod because I wanted to, most of the time you see balconies shot from the street and you're shooting up.
Right.
And I wanted to look at them dead on. So
how did you do that? You got across the street and took a picture across from the second floor to another second floor?
Well, that would be the hard way to do it because you'd be asking strangers if you could go into their house.
I know, right?
Not a good idea. So we built a tripod that extends 20 feet up.
Oh my God.
We put a remote, a little robot thing on the top of it and some clamps. So I was able to mount the camera and then from my computer, rotate the camera, the angle, the lens, the settings.
That is awesome. Did you have people stopping and asking you about it? I bet that was
on occasion, yes. We went through.
Thank God for him.
We went through hell and high water, assembling all the different components to invent this thing. And I'd say about 6 months afterward, somebody in the business, in the computer business, came out with a package that was very similar.
So you
But
could just buy it and unpack it. You had to invent yours.
Instead
Wow.
of figuring
Thank
it
God for ingenuity and technology, right?
out. I mean, we did it, but we certainly didn't do with a commercial effort in mind.
Right, right.
It was a practical.
It's a niche market, but you could see other people needing that same kind
Oh
of
yes,
getup.
your photographers, or your architectural photographers. are
Well,
going to want
nowadays
that.
you see more and more people using drones. I'm not sure how good a picture you can take with a drone, though.
No, I've seen some fine pictures with a drone, but how can you see a drone flying down Royal Street? Not very well.
Yeah.
You'd get punished, I think.
You
They
would
say,
get
"Come
some
with me,
attention.
sir."
This might be the time to do it when nobody's out.
Well, I've seen drones used a lot for wedding photography and for real estate.
Right.
And if
I've seen it for even downtown Ruston, and somebody was shooting drone footage of downtown, but they were
Right.
doing, it was all overhead shots, and they never did go and do an on the ground shot with a person or even with a robot to, do a street level shot. So it really
Yes.
took away from the presentation pretty drastically.
We had
Everything was
a-
aerial footage.
We had a tornado about a year ago, and they had drone footage that kind of went viral at the time, just following the path of the tornado through the town. And you have just
That's
some
scary.
shots that you couldn't get otherwise. Like when you're driving around looking at it at street level, you don't see the path the way that thing can show. But anyway, this is a fascinating topic. And did you talk to people who lived at some of those places or had businesses about their ironwork?
Yes. Of course. There are a lot of people who, especially in the French Quarter, are active preservationists and
Right.
and know the history of their buildings,
Yeah.
and know the when and why and how of it.
There's a certain love people have for New Orleans, and especially, the part you live in, what part of the city that might be. But I bet there are people that are really dedicated to preserving those buildings, and they want to know as much as they can about them.
Well, that's especially true of the French Quarter and areas of Uptown.
Right, right.
But metalwork is so elemental.
Yeah. It's
Kind of the basic of it's the
Some of
most basic.
some of the oldest technology we have is metallurgy.
Yes.
That was the tool to make other tools, and so you had now the other oldest technology is, of course, cooking. Do you want to talk about your cookbooks a little bit?
Sure. Well, back to the French Quarter.
Yeah.
And for a number of years, I had an advertising and public relations agency.
Yes, ma'am.
And we represented a lot of hotels and restaurateurs and the normal type of thing. A lot in the French Quarter too. And
Right.
Arnaud's, and as a result, I learned a lot about food.
Oh, yeah.
And Arnaud's asked me to write their book. And
Yeah.
so I did, because I had an art department and we could do the layout and the photography. We knew the mechanics of it. So we did that, and it was great fun. And then we just rolled into the other cookbooks. So what I did for the classic series, people aren't that interested in what Kit Wohl cooks. They could care less.
Right.
But they're interested in what Brennan's cooks and
Yes.
Commander's cooks and Arnaud's cooks. So we go to chefs everywhere here and ask them for their recipe. If we have it categorized, if it's Creole or festivals or cocktails, they'll give us a specific recipe, and then we test cook it here,
Right.
and
Oh, that's
shoot
good.
it here, and lay it out here.
A few years ago, we talked to Roy Gust. Do you know?
Yes.
Like, he does photography, and what restaurant was he with?
He was with Antoine's way back.
Right. So he kind of overlaps with a little bit with what you're doing here. I think he did a history of Antoine's at one point.
Yes, he did. I worked on that book.
Oh, did you really?
Yes.
He's such a great guy. I enjoyed
Oh, he's a doll.
afternoon with him.
He's quite the raconteur.
Well, Arnaud's has its own series of stories.
Oh gosh, Arnaud, yes.
It's a real legend.
I dearly love the Casbarian family who were able to acquire it from Germain Wells. And Archie Casbarian, the patriarch of the family, was the general manager of the Royal Orleans and the Royal Sonesta when I got into the business. And I started doing some work for the Sonesta. And then when he managed to acquire Arnaud's, we went over there with him as well. So my husband still has lunch with his children and his widow almost every day when it's not when we're not locked in.
Are you familiar with the old Shadow radio series, or you've heard the name of the Shadow?
Oh yes, of course.
So there was a radio series, a mystery, kind of a quasi Twilight Zone thing originally. It morphed into a magazine, then back into a radio series again. And the co-creator of the thing, Walter Gibson, was a great lover of New Orleans and set, I know, 3 of the Shadow novels in New Orleans. Well, when he was afraid of flying, so the story goes, so he would take the train down from New York to New Orleans, which you can imagine was a long, long trip, back in the Depression. But he would hop the train, go to New Orleans, and he would always eat at Arnaud's.
Oh, yes.
He was a great lover of Arnaud. So in his honor, because I write the same kind of fiction, so in his honor, my second to last story that I've written is set at a recognizable place called Freneau's, which is the name of America's great Revolutionary War poet Philip Freneau, but it was meant to evoke the sound of Arnaud's, the restaurant.
Oh, that's so nice.
So it even has some secret passages in it, and it's set during the very tail end of Prohibition in 1932.
Well, we have a lot of secret passages there at Arnaud's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's legendary for that. So I had some of them that figure in the story, along with a young punk who is a sort of an analog to Carlos Marcello.
Oh.
He's just called Carlos in the story because Carlos Marcello was kind of on the way up or down, as your perspective might be. So.
Oh, yeah. Just a second. Here we are. Yes, Mrs. Wells, who had the restaurant and inherited from her father, was quite a character. And her father was a self-named count. He called himself Count Arnaud.
Count Arnaud, yeah.
Count Arnaud. And he and the original Brennan's gentlemen were friends. And they would tease each other. And Arnaud would say, what does an Irishman know about French food and Creole cooking? And so Mr. Brennan happily went and showed him.
Right.
And then Germain, and he was the one that actually was arrested during Prohibition and tried, and the jury found him not guilty.
Oh, really? They weren't going to convict. Yeah, a jury nullification.
Not at all.
There were bootleggers all over the state of Louisiana, and there were some outside of Morgan City, I believe it was, or either Morgan City or Thibodeau, but it was down south of New Orleans, and they would get their bootleg hooch, and they would transport that stuff back to New Orleans.
Sure.
I think some was sold through Arnaud's, but anyhow, it was sold in the restaurant.
I'm sure it was.
In New Orleans, yeah.
Well, at Arnaud's, they disguised it in cups of coffee.
Right, yeah, you would go in and ask. I ripped that off in my story and had them asking for a cola or for a soda, or so I can't remember what it was, but it was a knockoff of what was actually going on. Yeah.
It was actually a cup of coffee. And then Antoine's, if you went into I'm trying to remember here, but I think if you went into the ladies' room, there was a doorway that then took you into an area where you could get your cocktail.
Like a secret passage or whatever?
Yes. And Arnaud's had a number of secret passages. And my favorite one is the one we call the president's staircase, because when a sitting president visits, it's quite the security issue.
Right.
And this is a staircase that's not used generally at all. And so he would be able to enter and depart every time using that stairway.
So slip in and slip out.
Yes. And then the second floor, all the little private dining rooms, the small rooms, all have doorbells inside. And that was when you were entertaining a less than public lady, the door was locked. And if you wished to have your waiter join you, you pressed the door buzzer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you could have a private dinner.
Yes, a very private dinner with a less than public lady.
Right.
There were the State Theater in Shreveport is the Strand. And there's
Yes.
There are a series of those secret passages. I've been in the Strand, but in fact, I've seen an Alfred Hitchcock Film Festival there years ago. But there are supposedly passages there where those business people would come in from East Texas and South Arkansas, and this is in the 20s now. They'd come in there and they would then leave via those secret passages to meet ladies of the evening, because they were in Shreveport in the big city, because that's the big that still is the largest city in this whole area, North Louisiana, South Arkansas, East Texas, or South Oklahoma. And so they would come into Shreveport, and oil and gas people, and primarily, and timber people too. But they would come in, and then they would meet those ladies of the evening and go out through those secret passages while they were kicking up their heels in Shreveport.
Monroe was. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say Monroe is an old frontier town, and they have the building that was once the brothel is still there, and it's right where the railroad track and the Washita River, so that's where people came into town, and supposedly the ladies there would greet the incoming gentleman out the windows, right? So yeah.
Oh dear.
Oh, for the good old days.
Yeah.
They cracked down on all that kind of stuff. So now you kind of have to be a little more secret about it. But there was a time, we were much more open with our vices like that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. We think we're modern and spiffy, but if you look back, we're not nearly as loosey-goosey as our forefathers.
Oh, I know, right? So
we have too much communication.
Your cookbooks, are they about do they have recipes? Are they about the history? Are they both?
They're recipes and history.
Okay.
But each recipe has I'll reach for behind me and grab one.
Yes, please.
Let's see, one of my faves. There are so many New Orleans stories. Oh,
I know, right?
This is okay. This is the cocktail book.
Yeah.
It tells us what the obituary cocktail is at Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop and the why of it. And at Elizabeth's, their cocktail was a corpse reviver.
Right.
So these were just Hanover drinks.
Tell us a little bit about the cocktail. Where did it come from?
It was, the word first appeared in an English language publication, but the gentlemen's only taverns, bars, and clubs replaced what were considered coffee houses. And that was in the late 1700s and lasted through the 1800s and lingered into the mid 1900s until Prohibition in 1920 to 1933.
One of our guests told us that once Prohibition hit, that women actually started going to the speakeasies, and it became co-ed rather than just a men's, place for men and women of ill repute.
I don't know about that. I do know my mother-in-law, the Roosevelt Hotel, had a one, you know, that bar, the Sazerac bar, there used to be men only. And on one day a year, they allowed women.
Oh,
And,
really? Wow.
And the women, I want to say in the 50s, all got together and stormed the Sazerac. And it was co-ed after that.
Right. Your video has cut out. I don't know if wire's being loose.
I don't know. Let me make sure I'm plugged in. I could be losing power here. It's a possibility.
Well, we can always go with just audio. It'll just end the show and tell part of it.
No, it's Arnaud's, the bar that's now French 75, was originally a men-only bar.
Okay.
And if you, yeah, I'm not even on the right side of the plug here. My helper went away. I don't know where she went.
Oh, well.
Or why. I'm not right. I'm not good here. Here it is. I have technical challenges.
Oh, yeah, that makes it all three of us.
Can make it sing and dance sometimes.
So the cocktail goes back a ways. Was it invented in New Orleans or?
No. But the first one we saw, are you there? There you are.
There you are.
Yeah.
The first one, the first cocktail here was the Sazerac, and
I've heard it's one of the older cocktails. I had one once. It was
it's the oldest American cocktail.
Okay.
Credited to Antoine Peychard, who devised Peychard's bitters. And it was an 1870s concoction.
Okay, and where was he when he created that?
He had a pharmacy in the French Quarter.
Okay, so cocktails in the United States got started in the French Quarter.
Yes, and he served his libations in a vessel that he called I'm going to mispronounce this, coquelier, and it's a French egg cup. And the localization of the word resulted in a mispronunciation. Cocktail.
Coquelier sounds a little bit like cocktail because that's part of the beauty of New Orleans is the mashing together of all these languages and people, kind of misunderstanding and half understanding what's being said.
Well, that tale could be true or not. And the word cocktail with a hyphen was noted prior to 1870 in a newspaper north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
And then it had been rudely used in a different context in London. It was simply a word. So we won't get into that. But a coffee bar down from Peychard's pharmacy was quickly renamed the Sazerac House.
Right.
And there it went. It's still there. The Sazerac cocktail.
Would you like to watch Huey Long make a Ramos Gin Fizz?
Sure, of course.
Let me see if I can get it to work.
He used to travel with his barman, Harry Ramos.
Did he? Okay.
Yes, in the 1880s. He traveled with his bartender so he could have it just so.
Right. Okay, let's see. Bring on Huey. Because it was a rather famous video at the time.
No doubt.
I'm on the water wagon.
Hold on. It's not working right. Hold on just a second.
I haven't had a drink for 18 months, but I'll sample this.
With his new power, Huey Long flaunts his extracurricular hijinks in public.
I'm on the water wagon. As you know, I haven't had a drink for 18 months, but I'll sample this, Ralph, in order to be able to assure you that it's genuine. I think that's all right. I think that's all right. Let me show about it. Old family custom. My grandfather devoted the first day in Louisiana, spinning it in the barroom, teaching the young man how to mix drinks and handing them back until he finally mastered the soft position. You sure he handed them back? Well, handed the glass back.
Okay, that's it for Huey.
We'll talk about that Friday. I understand. Okay, yes, sir. Back.
We're back. So Huey had a little demonstration on the proper way to make drinks. And
I'm sure.
Stop sharing. Okay, there we go. I'm still mastering the technology. I wouldn't say master. I'm still newcomering the technology. So there are all kinds of cocktails. Is there a basic, I guess it's basically alcohol and then mixed with stuff to make it, flavored?
There's so many different variations of it. There's punches and there's refreshers, and with, of course, martinis, teas, Pim's cup, cobblers is a big category. Planters, daiquiris. And of course, the hurricane. That was the first and last hurricane I've ever had was my first drink. So I never did that again. But lots of champagne. I wanted to tell you something about some of these beverages. They're just extraordinary. There's zombies and sidecars and stingers and rusty nails. But many of these cocktails go back, into the late 1800s.
Right.
And have stuck around.
Here's one from Celestine Eustace. She was the wife of the Supreme Court Justice, and she wrote an early cookbook, I think around the turn of the century. And it's Buckner Punch. Quart bottle of champagne mix, add 1 glassful of good brandy, 1 glassful of good rum, 1 wine glassful of good arak, 1 wine glassful of good kirsch, 1 wine glassful of good anisette, 1 wine glassful of good maraschino, 1 glassful of good caruca, 2 slices of ripe pineapple, 2 slices of sweet orange, 1 toddy glassful of pulverized sugar. At first, put in a small quantity of ice and later fill the bowl with large lumps of ice. It should stand about 3 hours before using.
Oh my God. You'd have to carry me out on a stretcher.
Oh, that's what you said.
You had to pour a lot of people out of there.
Wow.
The
one of my
foregoing,
favorite.
the foregoing
Oh, sure.
concoction would, I think, be death or destruction of anyone who sipped it. I should advise 2 quarts of water to each quart of punch. So,
Oh my goodness. There's a St. Charles punch from the old St. Charles Hotel that's akin to that. It's good grief. You would, I think, do it in a wash tub.
Right.
For the amount of booze in there.
Well, when you're in college, you make it with cheap stuff and you call it suicide. You mix all the alcohol you have handy together.
We called it Dak juice. And it got a lot of people in a lot of trouble.
Oh yeah, well that's what it's.
Many of our friends have families as a result.
Right. Emergency weddings, yeah.
Yeah, lots of them. But back to French Quarter and cocktails and restaurants. Marty's restaurant on Rampart was a client of ours and a dear friend. Marty passed away a long time ago, but he was a character. And had a magnificent little bar when you walked in. It's kind of in the entrance was the bar on the side. And a friend of mine was doing a around town story about Sazeracs and who had this one and who had that one and were they better, what was the range of them. And so she wound up at Marty's after half a dozen Sazeracs and ordered a Sazerac and a dozen oysters. And they put it on the bar for her. And she got up from her bar stool and went to another part of the restaurant. And when she came back, there was a older gentleman sitting in her chair, drinking her Sazerac and eating her oysters. And so she asked the bartender, she said, excuse me, there's a problem here. That gentleman's eating my Sazerac and oysters. And he said, yes, ma'am, that's Tennessee Williams, and he gets what he asks for.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's a great story.
He can have anything he wants. I'll
Because
make
he's
you
Tennessee
another order
Williams,
right
man.
now. And he lived just a few doors from there and dined there often.
Right. Well, I like to go to the Tableau, which is right at the corner of Jackson Square, and sit on the
Right.
balcony. And last winter, I got a rum toddy, and I don't know if that's the proper cocktail or not, but it's rum and something sweet, and it's hot. They heat up
Yes,
and they put
toddies
spice
are
in it.
hot.
Yeah, it was delicious. I had a couple of them, maybe.
I'll tell you what, there's two drinks that I'll waive for. One of them is a brandy milk punch, and that's cold. And those are deceptive because they go down very easily. And then the other one is around the holidays, and it's eggnog
Right,
with brandy.
right.
And that's served hot. And I want to tell you, it could get you in serious trouble.
Yeah.
The one I had wasn't that strong. I had it with supper and, drank 2 of them over the course of a meal, and I didn't really notice much of an effect. But
No,
it was
of course
really
not.
nice. The sun was going down. It was a crisp day, and it just warmed you up a little bit while you were drinking it.
Well, while you're there on that balcony, if you look at the ironwork, that's from the really famous blacksmith.
Oh, cool. So it all
And
ties together, right?
totally. So you're eating, drinking, and enjoying the artist's work.
And you need a rail because that balcony is tilted ever so slightly, I guess, to take the rain out.
That's true.
But everything tends toward the edge of the balcony. And last time I was there, it wasn't quite, it was warmer, but they were filming across the street. So I got to watch them, moving in stuff, and saw he was not the main star, but one of the co-stars in Queen of the South, and went up and met him, and it was kind of fun. You
For
never know.
sure.
He didn't eat my oysters, though.
Well, in my misspent youth, when I should have been in class, I was working a show at Gallery Circle. It was one of Tennessee Williams' plays, and at the same time, then my English teacher asked for a paper that discussed this particular play. So I asked him about it, and he gave me some information, some insight to it. And when I turned the paper in, my teacher said, you're totally out of it. You get enough. You just made all this stuff up. Where did you get this information? And I said, Mr. Williams gave it to me. He told me. And I want to tell you, I was hustled out of that class in a flash. She was not amused.
But it was true, right?
Oh yes. But I was an arrogant 17-year-old. Say, ha.
I would think having Mr. Williams tell you, even if it's a lie, it would still be you've gone to the primary source, right?
Oh yeah. I want to say it was the Glass Menagerie. In fact, I know it was the Glass Menagerie.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think the teacher I would have said, here you go.
She would have said, could I come down there and meet him? She'd be
right?
on her
Totally.
game.
We introduce us.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
That's the fun. That's the fun of the French Quarter.
let's talk about some of your other books. I spent 3 hours Sunday making a gumbo. So why don't we talk about...
Okay. That was...
it's right there.
One of my favorite books.
Hold on, let me zoom in on you. So,
Gourmet Magazine named this Cookbook of the Month.
Wow.
Which was a pretty huge honor. I was astonished. I was just a fledgling author.
So to start with, what is the history of gumbo and,
I think gumbo finds its roots in Africa.
Right.
And
because the word gumbo is an African word for okra, right?
yes, yes.
Although I don't like okra in my gumbo because I make a lot of it, and then every day it gets a little slimier. So I do the filet mostly.
See, well, this book has 50 gumbo recipes, 50 recipes, and they're everywhere from seafood gumbo through gumbo yaya through
Right. Gumbo
wild
cubes.
wood duck and andouille gumbo,
Right.
shredded pork with black-eyed peas, which sounds strange, but it's fabulous.
Yes, it does. Well,
It's fabulous.
Miss Tace used to make one out of greens, right? It was.
Oh yes, Leah Chase.
Leah.
That's in here.
So
She was
did
a
you
dear
get to,
friend.
Did you? Oh, you got to meet her.
Yeah.
I would always ask to meet her, and I'd only been a few times, and then before I got to, she passed away. So it's a huge loss.
No, she and I became very good friends. I was so fond of her.
Oh, I bet.
And we just sit there and giggle and laugh and talk trash. But she was quite the woman.
Well, if you go back, that restaurant has been there for decades.
Well, she started it. Well, her in-laws had the place, and it was a sandwich shop that served out of a window, which is still there. And they sold a lot of lottery tickets or some such thing. And when she married Dookie, she began becoming more and more involved in the restaurant.
Right.
But she had originally started out working in the French Quarter, came from a little country town, and came to the big city, was going to high school, living with her aunt, and then started working at the coffee pot when she got out of school. And she said it was really funny because they didn't allow women to cook. But, we had the storeroom for the goods was down the street. And so we had to carry 50-pound sacks of flour and rice down to the chef. But we weren't strong enough to cook.
Right.
So,
It was. Well, isn't the coffee pot, wasn't that by Preservation Hall? Is that the one?
yes. Yes.
And they make
It's a lovely
olives there.
Yes. And that's a terrific recipe.
But so Dookie gradually worked her way into the kitchen, I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, Leah did.
Leah, sorry.
Yeah, I think she never really came right out and said it, but I think she struggled with her mother-in-law's taste and her taste. And obviously she ran the restaurant then for years and years and years.
Right.
But she and John Folse, and he's very famous chef. John Folse was a good friend of Leah's. And after Katrina, before the restaurant had reopened, I went to bring her something that she'd asked for. So I pulled in the back parking lot and came in through the kitchen door, and Leah's there at the stove, stirring. I said, "What in the world are you doing, Leah? The restaurant's not open." And she said, "Well, I'm making gumbo." And I said, "Good grief, why are you making gumbo?" And she said, "Because the White House called. I'm not supposed to tell anybody this, but the White House called yesterday and said the president would like to come and have lunch."
Was that Bush at the time?
Yes. And she said, so I called Mr. Folse because I don't have tablecloths, I don't have tables, I don't have chairs, I don't have the stores, the goods to cook. And she said, so I called Mr. Folse, and that's what she called him, Mr. Folse. And I said, "Mr. Folse, what do I do? I have to get this done." And he said, "Well, Leah, you tell me what your menu is, and my men and I will be there tomorrow." And when I pulled into the parking lot, I kind of looked because there were several trucks standing around with his sign on them. And what they had done, they had packed up everything they had and their people and reinvented that restaurant overnight for the
Wow.
president.
Well, and if you go in there now, it is fixed up to the nines. It's got
Oh
nice,
yeah,
really nice stuff.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's not just a dive that you go in. It's a very well done restaurant.
Oh, it's a beautiful restaurant. And she was instrumental in the civil rights movement.
I've
And
heard
the
that.
meetings were there
Right.
on the second floor generally. A lot of the civil rights workers came there and were fed on the house for free because they'd been out marching. And she would send them down the street to a neighbor's house to shower and put
Cool.
on a fresh shirt because you didn't come into her restaurant
All
if you were
sweaty.
not properly dressed.
Right.
And
Right.
so she had she fed, and there were very significant meetings there.
Right.
Very, very historic meetings. No, she was a special
It was
lady.
it was a real gathering place. It's like there was a it was the first Black-owned office park in Ouachita Parish, specifically in Monroe. And a librarian friend of our show told us about this, that the bottom floor was like a doctor's office, maybe a dentist's office, and I don't know if it was a pharmacy or what. There were several offices, but the top floor was a club. And if you can believe, some of the great African-American entertainers, performers, musicians of the time were performing there. People, and this is giants. Today we regard as giants, but people like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Lena Horne came there. I mean, it was some real legends. And they were coming to Monroe to perform. And then when they would come into town, they had to either stay in a Black-owned hotel or in the homes of local families because of segregation. But I mean, they were coming to Monroe, and the building, unfortunately, now sits vacant in downtown Monroe. It's just sitting there and trying to fall in. Yeah, it's been bought by some people across town from you. Some consortium in New Orleans bought it, but as far as we know, they're doing nothing with it. So it's depreciating as we speak, unfortunately.
I hope they get it together. And
yeah, it ought to be at least declared a state historic site because, again, it was the first Black-owned office park in Monroe.
Yeah. Yes, I would venture to guess that's true.
And people were meeting there like mad, like you say. I mean, it was mostly people from the entertainment world, but I suspect in civil rights. I mean, I don't know this because Larry, our previous guest, didn't say this, but I wouldn't be surprised if people that were doing civil rights work in the Ouachita Parish, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't meet there because, again, it was a pretty well noted building.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of work went into that. Into the civil rights movement. A lot of meetings that were clandestine. People were afraid. They were very frightened.
Well, New Orleans was a violent place along with the rest of the South, but they had some rather infamous white riots there over the years. So, yeah, they had to be cautious.
Extremely so.
And it took those people like, Leah Chase and her friends that were helping, I'm sure, to provide a space where people could meet safely, privately, and do their work.
Totally. And have a good meal.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good food doesn't hurt. Well, and famously, she had pictures of herself and Barack Obama and also some news stories when he came there. And
oh, yes.
he was telling him to at least taste it before you put the Tabasco sauce on it.
Yes. She was such a funny lady. She was so funny.
And gumbo has to do with all of that. So the basics of gumbo, I guess you start with the roux. And I use stock as opposed to water.
I do too.
I like the stock.
I want the flavor.
Right. Well, and every Thanksgiving I make several ducks, smoke them for
That's
for
exactly what we do. We have a duck gumbo.
Yeah.
The next day. Duck soup, we call it duck gumbo. But it's smoked ducks, wild rice, and it's a gumbo.
I make the stock out of I trim the duck and, put the duck out to eat. But then everything else I save, I make stock after that.
Sure.
And freeze or cool the stock, take the fat off, and then I make duck fat roux, which is really good.
Yeah. That's a trick. I love it. We don't tell many people that trick.
Well, it's a lot of work when you consider how many hours went into making that roux. Most people aren't going to bother with it. But then you pick your, like I use onions, celery.
Your Trinity.
Right, the Trinity. And I usually put a bulb of garlic as opposed to a couple of cloves of it. I just crush the whole thing. But I made 4 gallons. So
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. And then
we make a gumbo and call it family gumbo.
And what's in it?
It's your basic chicken and andouille gumbo.
I started with chicken and andouille, and it didn't seem like enough, so I dumped some ham in there and a little more chicken and a pound of shrimp.
Well, just like the old Creoles, it was a kitchen sink recipe.
Right.
I mean, what was in it? What was on hand? And again, they were very thrifty, and it was hard times then.
Right.
And you had ladies who'd come from, wives who'd come from Spain and France, and they'd have a black cook.
Right.
And they'd say, I want you to make this French dish. And of course, the ingredients weren't here.
Right.
So the cooks would substitute what they knew and what ingredients worked and what ingredients were left over from a previous meal.
Well, and I've read that, originally it was okra based, but okra is only available part of the year in the older society. So that's when the filet started, which
Yes.
I think is ground sassafras.
It's ground sassafras. The Indians taught the French that.
And is it the roots or the leaves that they grind up?
The leaves.
The leaves.
Yes.
And I think you can make sassafras tea as well. I'm not sure about that, but
I've never been exposed to that.
Yeah, wasn't that the source or later on? I mean, it's similar to root beer.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right.
Is that sassafras or sarsaparilla? I can't remember.
It could be either.
It may be. It may be. It's been so many years. I had a teacher when I was growing up in Baton Rouge. She brought one of those to class, and we had it, and everybody was commenting on the fact. Yeah, one of them. I mean, she brought a lot for all the kids to have a whole glass full, so it was probably 2 or 3 gallons of it.
So sassafras tea is boiling the root bark of the sassafras.
Okay. There you go.
Does it say anything about a similarity to root beer, or is that something different?
I'm getting to that.
She brought so much to class so that everybody
sarsaparilla.
could have some.
It is sarsaparilla. I know I've had those confused in my mind. So right, and then licorice root. So sweet birch, licorice root, sarsaparilla, and vanilla. So there you go. So gumbo takes on kind of a local flavor depending on what ingredients you have available.
Yeah, where you are and what you have.
Right.
It's a very democratic dish.
But there are rules, because a couple of years ago Disney came out with their own gumbo. Did you remember that?
Yeah. What they put in it?
Quinoa.
Here's Liz. Gumbo is the herbs.
Oh yeah. And they only serve that on, is it Good Friday or
Thursday?
Thursday.
Holy Thursday. There's Miss Leah.
And people line up down the sidewalk.
They lined up. And this year, because of the quarantine, for Holy Thursday, I don't remember. They actually, because of the quarantine and the social distancing, they handed out the gumbo orders through the original sandwich window.
Wow. So back to the roots, huh?
Yeah.
We all cycle around.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Well, and I worry about our local, not the chains so much, but the local restaurants making it. Like, I've been trying to get, at least a few times a week, couple of times a week, buy local, restaurant food during the quarantine to help them stay going.
Of course. It's our obligation
Yeah,
to
there are
order
heritage.
from, yeah, we have to order from our local restaurants and eat Oreos for dessert.
That's right. And wait for the Hubig's pie to come back.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, the Creole cooks and that's a tradition like the metal workers. It's an apprenticeship program. And I didn't really understand it until I did the James Beard book and interviewed all these chefs, these 25 really major, top of the game chefs. And they bring people in, apprentices, but they call them, it's called a stage. So a young person will go stage for a chef, and that means they're going to follow the chef and see what he does and learn a thing or two, but they're doing it for free.
Right. It's training.
And no, do you understand what you're looking at?
Right.
Because it's a rigorous profession.
Right.
And so once you've decided you're going to stay there and kind of get your legs under you and get a very low paying job.
Right. Line cook.
No, not line cook. You start in the pantry. Carrots and potatoes and chopping onions.
Right.
Or working in the dish kit. So you start out earning your stripes.
Right.
And then then you get to work the line, and then you have to learn the different stations on the line, and then you become a sous chef, and ultimately, if you're any good, an executive chef. But there's different kinds of chefs also. But these chefs, it was so interesting to me because a chef can either go through a culinary school, as we have at CIA and other wonderful institutions, and then go stage and work with a chef in New York or California. That's one avenue. And then the other avenue is going to Europe and working overseas, which is very difficult because it's hard to be able to get a job. So if you're not working for free, it's darn close. So about the time, I'd say in the 60s, we had chefs from America going to Europe to learn their trade. And then we had chefs from Europe coming here to work in America because it was less structured and more opportunity.
I saw one story about some New Orleans cooks going to Japan and teaching the Japanese chefs, who were really great chefs, but they had no idea how to make a roux.
No.
And their gumbo was kind of clear broth or whatever, and so they learned to make a roux. That was the primary thing. And the first time I made a roux, it turned into a ball, like this ball of flour and probably not enough oil. But I was able to rescue the ball, and the rest had scorched to the bottom. I cleaned that out, but the ball hadn't scorched, so I dumped it on in anyway, and it was
bad boy.
When you're talking about having to do that back in the 60s, I mean, the cooking academies and so forth, cooking institutes weren't as prevalent in this country as they are today.
Well, see,
and so we have a young woman we're going to bring on the show here, hopefully within the next month or two. She's from North Louisiana, from Mendon, and went to the cooking. There's a cooking institute. I don't know if it's part of that CIA or what, but it's in Houston. So she didn't have to go terribly far, and she came right
there's
back
a
to
number of good schools now.
Yeah. I mean, she's back up here and cooking in Shreveport. She's got a restaurant in Shreveport. I think it's in downtown or right above downtown.
Yeah, we have some training opportunities and schools here. I sent my nephew to the Delgado Culinary Institute, and when he interned at several restaurants here, which is part of the intern program.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It was neat because they pay them. The restaurants pay the kids.
That is good.
So they have money to go out and party, and and have their aunt pay their rent.
Didn't John Foltz? I was just gonna say, didn't John Fold start one at Nichols?
Yes, he has one in Lafayette.
Oh,
Well,
is it in Lafayette?
another way people get into it is just through family. Like there's another podcast headed up by Mark Bologna and Beyond Bourbon Street, and his father owned Teddy's out there on Franklin. He said, you know, they would make these huge vat of roast beef, and there were pictures of him and his siblings, you know, cleaning out the vat. You know, they would
Sure.
empty it and scrub it down, and they would be
Of course.
standing in there, right? And you just
Pretty
we met
rough.
Leah Chase's granddaughter at Dookie Chase one day. You know, she was working in there, and so it's a lot of family. You know, you pass along these
Oh.
traditions,
That's the way it works. That's totally the way it works.
and then they get in a fight, and you have two restaurants with the same name.
Oh, well, one of the chefs is really doing a lot of traveling and showing off New Orleans food is Michael Galata, who has Maypop and Mofo. And Michael did the European work. He went to Europe and worked in Germany and I think Italy as well for quite a while, and you know, got his credentials going. And now, and I think he was with John Bash, and then he opened his own place and has done very well. He's remarkable. But he just went to Japan, and he's done a lot of the big network morning shows.
Right.
He's an engaging, intelligent man, and he's funny. You know, he's a doll, and we love Michael.
So Creole, I mean, gumbo is kind of like jazz in that there are rules, but within the rules, there's improvisation.
Yeah, there's steps and improv, and again, it all goes back to using what you have.
Yeah, you know, like the day I was making gumbo the other day, I got a recipe, but then I altered it based on what I had. You know, okay, this looks good. And start with 2 pounds of chicken, 2 pounds of andouille. I need some more meat. Here's some shrimp in the freezer. Let's throw that in.
Let's use that. Yes, that's a clean out the freezer gumbo.
Yeah, that's
the recipe is infinitely malleable, I guess, or at least it's quite malleable.
As I told you, Donna Link's recipe for pork and black-eyed pea gumbo knocked me out of my chair. It was so good.
So it is good. See, and I would have never.
It's divine.
I would have never considered putting black-eyed peas, but it's filling. You know, that's something.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great taste, great flavors. And then we made a gumbo here. Jeremiah Tower, he's a chef, one of the Beard Chef of the Year gentlemen. He's a dear friend as a result of that book, and was here visiting when the new president of Popeyes came in and asked to meet me because I did Al Copeland and Popeyes work for years, for 40 years.
Wow.
And so because I'm the institutional memory.
Right.
So
I used to make the pilgrimage to go see the Christmas lights every year.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big thing when I lived down there.
Absolutely. I was the poor wretch hiding in the bushes, freezing to death. But no, so we didn't know what to feed these people for lunch. And so we started throwing some ideas around that a couple of chefs had turned me on to. So we made a Popeyes fried chicken gumbo.
Wow, now that's cool.
And it was phenomenal.
Did you put the crust in there?
Well, this is the trick that we used. We took the crust, the skin and the crust, and used a sieve and kept the flour, the crust, the flour, which is flour.
Right.
And we made our roux from that.
Oh, wow.
And then, pulled the chicken pieces off the bird.
That does sound good.
Parts. And it was knockout. And the guy, he's a huge executive, a wonderful man. And they were just blown away. They couldn't believe it. But you can do all kinds of things with leftover Popeyes.
Right. Well, I like to go in the store and get the rotisserie chicken And you eat a sandwich maybe the first night,
Of
but then you can
course.
take the rest off and make some kind of gumbo or some other
Chicken and rice.
Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of good casseroles, one pot dishes.
Because they're fairly cheap, $6 or $7, and you can eat the first night, and then you have leftover. Usually, you need to do something with it. So,
Yeah, of course.
well, we've been doing this for a while. Why don't we end up with your desserts? You've got a dessert book.
Yeah, it's up here. Let's see where it is. Where did they put it? Here it is. This was the first of the series.
Okay, so you started with dessert. You're like me.
I'd rather have dessert than
Yeah, let's start with dessert. So it's not just bread pudding, but I guess a good New Orleans bread pudding is a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about that.
Bread pudding. You want to know about bread pudding?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the best bread pudding is a matter of opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Debate. We're going to debate about it.
And do we use raisins in it or not?
Oh, you're right.
And do we put whiskey in the sauce or not? And what kind of whiskey?
I like it with apples diced up in there too. Those are pretty good.
But that's also quite versatile dish. We've made a figgy bread pudding for Christmas.
That sounds awesome.
And it was lovely. And I think we used brandy in it. We used some kind of alcohol. And it was great.
And again, it's choosing what you have in your kitchen. Here's your day-old bread. What are you going to do with it?
Exactly.
But hey, we can make bread pudding out of it.
Well, the other fun with bread pudding, which I dearly love, is Commander's bread pudding. And I was there with a dear friend, and Jamie, the chef, who also left too soon, took us back in the kitchen because we were talking about bread pudding. And he showed us how to make bread pudding souffle.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Now, and the recipe's here in that book, but it's a faux souffle. It's not really a souffle.
Okay.
But they have the bread pudding mixture, right? And then they whip up a meringue.
Ooh, yeah.
A stiff meringue. And then they combine those two and put it in a souffle cup.
Oh,
and bake it off.
Yeah.
And so you wind, and then they pierce the crust with a spoon and pour in a healthy serving of creme anglaise. It's just sit on a stick.
Yes, right.
Shocking, but divine. Let's see, I'm looking for the recipe here. Here it is. It's a bread pudding souffle. You're not going to find much better eating.
Let's see, lower it just a little bit. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that looks good.
That's the bread pudding souffle. That was quite a lot of fun, cracking that recipe. And then Palace Cafe has a white chocolate bread pudding.
Well, Mark Twain had a saying, supposedly, I learned it on the internet, so I'm not quite sure, but New Orleans food is as delicious as the less criminal forms of sin. So
I believe that. I believe that completely.
That definitely looks like a sin to eat that, man. I can't wait.
Oh, it's really good. Then you talked about the callus.
Yes, which is rice. Now, how do you make that? Because I made challah and it wasn't good. And the rice fell apart when it was cooking. It just kind of floated in all directions.
No, we made a lot of that. A lot of. I'm looking for it. It's not that I'm forgetful or anything, but my memory is not as good as my computer. At all.
Supposedly, you're supposed to ferment it, and I didn't have any idea. Like, I didn't know.
Yes. It's not in this book. Challah cake is in another book. It's in the Creole book, I think. But it's rice and a yeast, and the reason it was so old and so wonderful, the Creole cooks who developed it, the household cooks, they would, if you if you are staying current with what's happening in kitchens now during this period, a lot of people are baking bread.
Right, right, right.
And if you don't have yeast, you can make your own.
Well, it's sourdough.
And you do that by letting it set out overnight, the flour and water, or the rice and water overnight. And it picks up the yeast in the air. But
Right.
it has to sit out quite a while to get to that.
Now, are these rice, these are cooked rice grains? It's not rice flour or something?
No, it's rice grains. It's leftover rice.
Right.
It's leftover rice. And I'm winging it here, but you mix it with some flour and a little bit of sugar.
Okay.
And then you make it about the size of a tablespoon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people make a ball, some people make a tablespoon shaped thing, and then you fry it.
Right.
And then you dust it with powdered sugar,
Right.
or whatever you'd like to dust it with.
And apparently this goes back to early New Orleans times, like
Very
maybe even
early.
before the beignet made its
Oh,
appearance.
way before. The ladies who lived in Tremé many of them were street vendors,
Mm-hmm.
and they would go through the French Quarter in the mornings with their baskets and sing "Kala Kala," and the cooks would come out and buy the kala for the family's breakfast.
Oh, okay. Because it's a weighty. I had it at the old coffee shop, you know, the one that we talked about. And it's heavy, you know. It's not a lightweight kind of.
It depends on how you cook it, how you
I
make it.
guess so. But it.
I mean, so I've had some that are very light, and then that's also a super versatile recipe.
So you can put things in it. I think they may have put raisins in theirs. I'm not.
I was about to ask if you could put raisins or dates or you could put up probably cut up dried apricots.
Oh yeah, anything. Truly.
Any kind of dried fruit would be good in it.
A chef here has become quite famous for his. No, it's a beignet he does. It's not a kala, but I've seen kala take a savory turn, and you can't do that. Just eliminate your sugar.
I went in
seasonings.
I went in it was basically boiled seafood, but they had a crawfish kala. I mean, not kala, beignet.
Beignet,
where they
yes.
put crawfish into the beignet and didn't put sugar on it, so it was savory.
Yes, and then there's a crab meat beignet that's quite famous.
I bet.
And so you can enhance these with a lovely sauce.
Right. Drizzle something on it.
Something wicked like hollandaise.
Yeah. So tell us about other New Orleans desserts. Like, I know bread pudding, but there are a lot of other.
Well, bananas Foster.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
that was invented there, right?
Right. That was Brennan's. Ella Brennan had, she was a young woman working there. And here's the picture of a.
Yeah. You put it on ice cream. And New Orleans is famous for its women chefs. You know, like not everywhere was is open to women being.
Was more and more so. But, you know, Arnaud's first chef was a woman.
Yeah.
Way back. In the early
wasn't it a woman that invented brunch? Am I remembering that right?
Let me think for a minute. Yeah, that was Ella Brennan.
Okay.
Her brother was in England, and he called her and said, "I'm here at a hotel, and they have a trio playing in the restaurant." And so Ella said, "Oh, I can see that here. We could do jazz and make it jazz brunch."
Yeah, man. What an idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And she also spurred on Bananas Foster. She didn't cook, but she knew food.
Right.
She knew process. And she had her uncle ask, who's running Brennan's at the time, asked her to come up with a special dessert for one of his friends who had just gotten a big award. and he was with the company that imported all the bananas, come up with a banana dessert. And so she just threw it at the chef and said, do something with ice cream and bananas and flambe the thing.
Yeah.
And there you go.
So have to
That
have
was
a
the
little
magic of
alcohol in it.
Ella.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of my favorite desserts.
Oh yeah.
So
And
what
you
are
don't do
some,
that. You don't make bananas foster if you have small children or slow pets.
that's right. So what are some other New Orleans desserts that people might want to check out?
Oh
Buy your
golly.
book and get their
Let's
recipes.
see. Let's see. We have, well, pralines, obviously.
Oh yeah, tell us about the praline.
Well, the
Yes.
pralines go back to our French nuns who
Yeah,
made a sugared almond candy in France.
right,
And they came here and they had no almonds, they had pecans. So
right.
they created the pecan
And
praline.
New Orleans has pecan groves, like old,
Oh yeah, yes,
you know,
yes.
they just have lots of pecans down there, and so that became
I'm not,
us.
I'm not certain, but the nuns were really pivotal. And at the time I wrote this book, there were nuns at the, I'm looking for it here, Sister Mary.
Hanchard?
55. Pardon me?
Hanchard? Was it Mary Hanchard?
No, it was Sister Mary.
Right.
And it was César du Palais Praline, who was a Grand Marshal of Napoleonic France.
Right.
And his cook, Clément Lessange, coated his master's almonds with sugar to prevent indigestion.
Right.
But the early settlers of New Orleans in the 1700s, the nuns, contributed mightily to our heritage,
Right.
and our
Totally.
spiritual well-being.
The
But among other
Ursulines
things,
were the first load, I believe.
I'm not sure, but today, in recent time, at the convent uptown,
Right.
the Poor Clares, Sister Mary makes and sells her pralines.
Oh, cool. So
And-
they're still in the business.
Oh yes, and you could ring the doorbell, ring the convent bell,
Ask for some
and-
pralines.
and buy pralines. And if they had them, and sometimes they didn't have them, but it was quite the beautiful thing to do.
There's a praline shop on Royal, and I was in there one day, and I was noticing the lady that was making the pralines was like dressed to the nines. I mean, she looked sharp, and I went over and just chatted with her about it. And before I left, would you like a picture? So we got a picture together, and I figured out why she goes to work so dressed up. Oh yeah, there we go.
That's Sister Mary's praline and her praline recipe.
Yeah. Because she knows her picture is going all over the world, and so she wants to look right.
Oh yeah, and here's the convent.
Okay, cool. And what street is that on?
It's at Magazine and give me a minute here. I'll dredge it. Henry Clay.
Oh, okay, Magazine and Clay.
Henry Clay, and you'll
Is that
see
over
the
there
huge,
near
the tall brick walls around it. It's
Okay.
a fabulous place.
I'll have to try that out. Well, do you have any one last dessert you want to mention before we I see we've been going a couple hours.
Okay.
Anything that they ship down from Florida parishes like Hammond area, say strawberries in there?
Oh gosh, yes. And we've used a number of strawberry recipes. Strawberries are really versatile.
And
We love dough bash cakes.
oh
It's
yeah,
a New Orleans tradition, dobage.
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 And dobage. And that was made by Beulah Ledner. She had a little bakery, and she retired in 1949 and sold her recipes. But I remember the bakery before, and it lasted a long time after she retired. But she sold the bakery to Gambino's, and they have really waved the dobage cake flag. But in my family, you can't have a birthday or a holiday without a dobage cake.
And that's one with a lot of thin layers with icing between them?
Yes, and that's a beast.
Oh, yeah.
To make. It's 7 layers, I think. If I recall.
How many, do you just get a bunch of cake pans and just half fill them up? Is that how you do it?
That's what I did. And it's not half, it's about a quarter. That's the easy way. And other people who are more talented can slice a layer into 3 layers.
Oh my goodness.
That's not my skill set.
No.
So I went to Walmart and bought 7 or 8 pans. They were very inexpensive.
I tried to make a jelly roll one day and wound up with like the whole kitchen floor was covered with powdered sugar. It was just, and the thing kept breaking. I did not do it right. So.
Well, you're either a baker or you're not, and I'm a cook. I'm not really a baker.
I'm not
I can fake it
right.
with a gun at my head, but I'd much rather have a pot of something going.
Right. Yeah. I don't make many desserts, especially I'm, not supposed to be eating sweets anymore. The doctor fusses at you, and so I do a lot more like meat-based and kind of stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been great getting to know you and your work, and you've done such interesting.
Well, come back. We're open all the time.
I know, right? Except for right now.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Well, tell us Tell us one more time the name of some of your books and
New Orleans classic desserts, Creole, festivals, cocktails, seafood, appetizers.
And it's a whole series, right?
Series.
So collect them all, and they make great gifts, right?
Oh, well, that was the thought behind them. They're small books. They fit in a backpack, a purse, or a briefcase.
Mm-hmm.
And they're priced under $20.
And then your book on ironwork.
That's another adventure. That's New Orleans icons. Iron lace.
Iron lace by Kit
Wohl.
Is that a German name?
Wohl, yeah. I think originally, yes. In that, not German, no. Romanian, I think.
Oh, really? Cool.
Russian. Going back, thinking what my husband's lineage is.
Right.
Russia and the parts of Russia that broke off and changed.
Well, thank you so much. This has been
Thank
great.
you.
We really appreciate it.
We'll put this video up right away, and then we'll put the audio up in a couple of months where we record ahead on the regular podcast. But this is a real good one for our YouTube channel. We're just getting started
good
with videos.
We love that. But I mean, if you love food, if you love New Orleans and you love chefs as we do, this is your place.
Right. That's it.
And they are, one of the chefs told me one day, I knew I was going to be a chef when the man who was my mentor said, being a chef means you are to nurture.
Right.
So if you have a nurturing spirit, there you go.
That's it. Well, thank you so much, Kit. This has been great.
Thank you. Come back soon.
Thank you.
Will do. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, gentlemen.
Take care. Take care.